Welcome to the Word Podcast. The Lord God has given us His Word. Let us learn it. Let us live it. Let us rejoice in it. Spread the Word. Blessings, everyone. This is Dale. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Word Podcast. We continue going through the Gospel of John, and what you're going to see as we progress through the Gospel of John is that things become more and more intense. There's already a group of Jewish leadership that are desiring to kill Jesus. They're wanting to do him in. And Jesus knows this, but the crowd doesn't know it. And we saw that in the last episode. So I'm going to back up and bring us into context for that. And they didn't know that that their leadership were actually trying to entrap Jesus, trying to arrest him, trying to do away with him. So in John chapter 7, verse, 19, Jesus said this, "Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you carries out the law? Why do you seek to kill me?" And so Jesus is speaking particularly to the Jewish leadership, the ones that were seeking to kill him. Well, verse 20 told us that the crowd answered, "You have a demon. Who seeks to kill you?" You know, they thought it was incomprehensible that somebody would be seeking to kill him. They knew that it was causing disruption and the things that were happening with the signs and the wonders and the miracles. They knew that this was not normative, right? But why would somebody want to kill him? And so they were accusing him of having a demon. That's how crowds are, folks. Okay, generally speaking, if the masses are saying something, you can know that the masses are wrong. Okay, well then Jesus responded to this in verse 21. Jesus answered them, "I did one deed, and you all marvel." Well, what one deed is he talking about? Well, there again, that's when you have to remember the whole context of what we've been looking at. And you know, in our times together right here, we'll look at anywhere from 2 verses to maybe a dozen verses at one setting. But if you're not careful, things get fragmented, and you have to back up and see what the entire forest is. Well, Jesus is about to help us do that. So he says, "I do this one deed, and you all marvel." Well, what one deed was it? He'll tell us, verse 22. "For this reason, Moses has given you circumcision." And then parenthetically, Jesus said, "Not because it is from Moses, but from the fathers. And on the Sabbath, you circumcise a man." So what Jesus is saying, hey, you know, in the law of Moses, and this came down from Father, in the law of Moses, you circumcise a child, a male child. And you do it on the 8th day after they're born. Sometimes people have questions about this. You know, how do they do this when you read in the Old Testament? Well, Jesus gives us insight because he says that on the Sabbath, you circumcise a man. So a child would be circumcised on the Sabbath day if that was 8 days after he was born. So Jesus says, you know what? In the law, it requires you to circumcise somebody on the 8th day. You will do that on the Sabbath. Verse 23. "If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses will not be broken, are you angry with me because I made an entire man well on the Sabbath?" Oh, now we're remembering. That's what the problem was. That's what they're so angry about. That's the reason they wanted to kill him, remember? Because Jesus had healed somebody on the Sabbath day. And when Jesus healed that person on the Sabbath day, he told him, "Hey, I want you to arise, grab your pallet, and take off." The man did. Well, then he was confronted by the Jewish leadership, and they said, "You're not allowed to carry your pallet on the Sabbath. That is work." And he says, "Well, I don't know. All I know is the guy that healed me told me to pick up my pallet and walk off. And so I did." And so Jesus was dealing with the rabbinical interpretations of what the Sabbath was, the man-made rules and regulation. And so Jesus used an example. He says, you know, you actually apply Moses' law in relationship to circumcision on the Sabbath. You do that. Is that not work according to your interpretation of work? And yet you go ahead and do it. He's showing how inconsistent they were. So verse 24, he continues, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." So he's telling them, you don't need to judge according to, you're looking at somebody saying, oh, well, they're keeping a law because the Sabbath law because they're not carrying a pallet, or they're breaking the Sabbath law because they are carrying a pallet. He says, you don't do that. Don't look upon the appearance, but look and judge with righteous judgment. Look upon the heart. Look upon the intent. Okay, look upon what is happening. You know, Jesus had no intent, and he never did break the Sabbath. He did break man's rules and regulations in their interpretation of that. He didn't even want to do that, but it's the same way we are today. If somebody thinks that in our society that you never break any laws, you're a fool. There are so many laws that you break them and don't even know about them. We see that politically, and we see it within governmental things and even within business things. If somebody wants to come after you and accuse you of something, they can't accuse you of something, okay? Because there's so many rules and laws and regulations, the same things that happen right here. So Jesus says, no, you look upon the intent of the heart. Now, let's look at the last verse here, verse 25. So some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, is this not the man whom they're seeking to kill? So they'd heard something about somebody being sought out to kill, but they're saying, is this the one? Let's go ahead. We'll read a couple more verses. We got time here. So verse 26, look, he is speaking publicly, and they're saying nothing to him. The rulers do not really know that this is the Christ, do they? So this is turning around on these Jewish rulers, because the people are saying, wait a minute, we've heard that they were wanting to kill somebody, and we heard that it was the one doing all the miracles, and this is the one doing the miracles, and this is one we're hearing, and yet they're doing nothing. They haven't arrested him. Here he is teaching. So is it the fact that the rulers really know that this is the Christ, and that's the reason that they're leaving him alone? Verse 27, however, we know where this man is from, but whenever the Christ may come, no one knows where he is from. So they're saying, wait a minute, we know what city this guy grew up in. We know who his mother and father are. We know his background, but we've always thought that when the Christ came, that no one would know where he's from. Well, that's also not true either. The Old Testament gave tremendous detail about where Messiah is coming from and all that. So the bottom line with this, you see that the people are in a bit of an uproar, because they're going, what is going on here? The Jewish leaders are saying, they were going to kill this guy, and this is the one, and yet they haven't done anything, and here he is teaching. What is happening with all that? Well, it's about to come to a sort of a climatic thing in this particular moment right here, but we'll save this for the next time. In the meanwhile, reflect upon this, okay? Think upon this. Realize that too often we look upon the appearances from the outside without really knowing what the intent of the heart is with things. Sometimes things look great and they look wonderful. Somebody may say, oh, that's marvelous, but the intent of the heart is that of the whitewashed sepulcher. There's other time the external may not look at all what we thought, but the intent of the heart is pure and has been transformed by the Most High God. Seek the Spirit of the Lord and let the Spirit guide us in these things, okay? Again, I'm Dale, and I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.